Look, you're not going to play an absolutely perfect A-plus type of game every single time you step on the football field, especially when you get later on in the season when the caliber of competition seems to go up. But even a B game for Penn State in this game was certainly enough to top the SMU Mustangs by 28 in the first round of the college football playoff.
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
Certainly a lot of talking points coming out of this win for Penn State at home in Happy Valley Whiteout State College over the ACC's SMU Mustangs. One thing that isn't being talked about a lot, James Franklin got a top 10 win. This was an SMU team, although seeded number 11 in the bracket. This was the team that was number 10 in the final college football playoff rankings. Does this qualify as a big-time win for James Franklin, a guy that hasn't been able to get a lot of big-time wins? Well, we'll save that for another day. You can certainly debate that into the comments whether that qualifies in that group of not being able to win the big game that James Franklin certainly was living in. But it says something of how Penn State was able to roll in at their home stadium, taking on a team that they were certainly more talented than, and they're just flat out taking care of business and dominating. Big thumbs up to James Franklin and this coaching staff for getting it done against SMU. All right, so I'm going to address this. I shouldn't address this. I shouldn't spend time saying this guy's name, but I'm going to anyway. At the end of last night's Indiana and Notre Dame game, Sean McDonough opened his mouth, and he kind of went on a little bit of a rant, a classic SEC, ESPN type of rant when that game was out of hand between the Hoosiers and Notre Dame. And he says, what has the Big Ten done to kind of earn that spot up there with the SEC, that they are so much better than the Big 12 conference, that they are so much better than the ACC? Well, here you go. The next day, 11 a.m., a noon kickoff, you've got an 11-1 regular season Penn State. You've got an 11-1 regular season SMU. Both of these teams made it to their respective conferences championship game and ended up losing. Of course, Penn State losing in Indianapolis to Oregon, and the Ponies losing in Charlotte to the now number 12 seed Clemson Tigers. So you've got teams in both conferences that are very similar in terms of the pecking order within their respective leagues. This game is a perfect example, right, why the Big Ten is a much superior league. This game is a perfect example of the growing gap between the Power Two with the Big Ten and the SEC up there, and the difference between them and the ACC and the Big 12 certainly down here. Like the Penn State, they got the Jimmies and the Joes. They got the players, especially in the trenches, that SMU does not. That was on full display. This was an absolute slaughtering, and you certainly saw the gap between those two level of plays, because I think the Big Ten and the SEC, it's a different level of play. It's a different level of football. You can debate how much different or how much the gap is, certainly than the ACC or the Big 12 right now. It was on full display in State College there amongst that whiteout crowd. All right, let's get into this football game. Why don't we? Here's the thing about early in the football game. I thought SMU was doing a decent job moving the football against one of the best defenses in college football in the Penn State Nittany Lions. But you can't talk about this game without talking about those Mustang mistakes, without talking about Kevin Jennings and not one, but two pick sixes right away. Those two pick sixes were the first 14 points of the football game for the Penn State Nittany Lions. Of course, you've got Dominic DeLuca taking it to the house. You've got Tony Rojas taking it to the house. Linebacker, the linebackers putting points on the scoreboard for the Penn State Nittany Lions. And Penn State really needed that defense to stand out as much as they did early on in this game, because something we'll get to here in just a little bit, the offense really wasn't in sync. It wasn't in rhythm. They weren't really doing their part early. So for Tom Allen's defense to step up and put SMU in that hole and put that type of pressure on them certainly gave Penn State a pedestal to stand on early in this game, and that pedestal continued to get taller and taller and taller as they looked down on the SMU Mustangs, certainly throughout this game. And pressure. When I talk about the differences between a team like Penn State towards the top of the Big Ten and a team like SMU towards the top of the ACC, the big difference, of course, was the trenches. We all know about Penn State's defensive line and what they can do. And there were many times, like early in the game, I could see it was clear that Abdul Carter was getting off the ball and he was beating his opponent on the other side of the line of scrimmage consistently. The same with Denai Dennis Sutton. And I kept on watching that as this football game went on. And 11, 33, and there were a handful of others. They were just beating SMU players off of the football. They were winning those battles 80% of the time. Now, Kevin Jennings, of course, would use his mobility to kind of move the pocket and get to the outside, and maybe they'd throw quick passes or they'd run the football out of certain formations and certain packages, so that pass rush wasn't able to get to the quarterback on 80% of the snaps, but it was very clear that Penn State certainly outmanned what SMU had in pass protection, and once they really continued to dial it up, and they continued to get into the face of Kevin Jennings, that's when Kevin started to see ghosts a little bit. That's when he really quickened up his internal clock to be able to make some of these throws down the field, and that's where things really started to spiral out of control for SMU, certainly in this game. And this was an SMU team that also did not get anything going in the run game as well. You look at what the Mustangs were able to do on the ground, 36 carries, just 58 yards on the ground. So when Penn State is doing their thing and they're winning those battles off of the line of scrimmage, it's really tough to stop Abdul Carter. It's really tough to stop Denai Dennis Sutton, whether you're SMU or no matter who you are. Certainly, you look what happened with Oregon. I thought Penn State had a decent game against the Ducks in that game, even though Oregon scored a lot of points, specifically in that football game. But no matter who you play, that's the point I'm trying to make. No matter who you play, it's going to be a really tough assignment to be able to block these guys, certainly coming off the edge. So when you can't establish a run game, and when these guys are winning those type of battles play after play after play, and you're on the road in this type of environment, it's really tough to get anything going when you don't have the players, when you don't have the Jimmies and the Joes that Penn State has on the other side of the football. Now, overall, I thought this was like a B game for Penn State. I thought that game in the Big Ten Championship, that was their best performance, I think, of the season. And then you look at this game, and let's talk about maybe this Penn State offense early on. I talked about how the defense was kind of bailing them out. They were helping out this team because the offense really, they were a lot like, I just took the snowblower out for the first time here in Minnesota. And, you know, when it's been in the garage for months and months and it hasn't started, takes a couple of pulls and then the engine finally gets humming. And when you got to like midway through the second quarter, that's when the engine finally turned over for the Penn State Nittany Lions offense. And it certainly got going because in the first quarter and then maybe the early part of the second quarter, Drew Aller was kind of off a little bit. The rhythm was off a little bit. The timing was off a little bit. Aller, 13 of 22, just 127 yards passing in this game. And I thought the pass game would really be something that Penn State would have an advantage in, but it was really the run game that really was the factor on offense that propelled Penn State to a big-time victory over SMU. I thought Tyler Warren could have a great opportunity to get open down the field and have a big game, but because of maybe Aller being a little bit off of his game, not playing an A type of game, you got what you got with Tyler Warren. 4 catches, 33 yards. He had 1 rush for 6 yards in this game. But once we got to that middle of the second quarter on, that's when Penn State really started to run downhill. And that's when they really started to get that engine humming with the run game. They had a really good performance in the run game in their last game against Oregon. And they had a really good performance here in the run game against an SMU defense that was a top 5 defense in the country against the run coming into this game. 37 carries, 181 yards, and 3 touchdowns on the ground as a team for the Nittany Lions, and it's business as usual kind of at the top of the box score. Nick Singleton, 14 carries, 90 yards, and a score. Katron Allen, man, he ran really hard in this game. I love the way he runs the football. I love the way Fat Man really puts his shoulder down and does his thing. 11 rushes, 70 yards, and 2 scores for 13 in blue and white running the football. And once that Penn State offensive line continued to get a lot more confidence, they were able to get better and wear down SMU. I've been very impressed, and I know people on Twitter were also kind of calling this out as well. I've been impressed with the improvements and the strides that Nolan Rucci has made since he's kind of been plugged in to the starting lineup with Anthony Donkow out for the season. So that has certainly been a welcome addition and a welcome replacement, maybe I should say up front, on this offensive line in terms of run blocking. There were some instances in this game for Penn State where they didn't exactly do the best in pass blocking, so that's something that certainly needs to get better as they continue to advance throughout the college football playoff. But you talk about them playing a B game and getting an A result. Man, that best part of that B game, as I mentioned before, certainly was that defense for the Penn State Nittany Lions. It was just kind of, I'm watching this game, and, certainly wasn't overall super impressed. But once again, like we said at the top of this thing, Penn State's B game is a whole lot better than what SMU, whatever grade you want to give them, whatever they threw out as well. It's a pretty darn good B game. I'll certainly say that as well. And the last thing I want to say, how about a round of applause to the 100,000 plus in attendance at Beaver Stadium. Nittany Nation, they brought it. They brought the juice, the home field advantage, whether certainly it was the 100,000 plus in the stands, whether it was the weather, just everything combined. Once I said it about Notre Dame and Indiana, and I'll say it here about Penn State and SMU, home games on campus are absolutely electric. There's so many people out there saying negative things right now, and there's a lot of people bitching and moaning. But I'm a guy that looks at the positives. These home games on campus are electric. They're amazing. Give me more. Feed me more. This Penn State crowd specifically, there was times where SMU was down by the goal line, forcing multiple false starts. Keeping them out of the end zone was certainly a big part in this game. And I want to say one more thing about James Franklin. I gave him credit at the beginning of this commentary. There was a point in time, I believe it was when it was 14-0. Yeah, it was 14-0 because this was after the 2 pick sixes. And they went for it down near their own 20-yard line, and they didn't get it. And I tweeted out immediately, James Franklin, he got bailed out by a Dominic DeLuca interception, and that actually eventually led to their first offensive touchdown of the game, in which they took a 21-0 lead at that point in time. I think the cold weather really affected the punt game. It really affected the kicking game in this one, and I think actually James Franklin was very confident in his defense and very confident in his team at that point in time, and that's why he went for it. But still, if SMU was able to take that ball and they're able to put it in the end zone, you got a 14-7 game at that point, and it's a completely different ball game. So old Dominic kind of bailed out his coach, certainly, in that particular situation as well. All right, the Penn State Nittany Lions are advancing. New Year's Eve, they will take on the Boise State Broncos, the G5 representative in this college football playoff, champions of the Mountain West Conference. It's Ashton Jeanty, right? That's what Penn State, of course, needs to be focused on. They need to be dialed in on. I talk about the difference between the ACC and the Big Ten. Now you're talking about G5 versus Big Ten. Certainly a favorable matchup for the Penn State Nittany Lions, but they need to be focused on how do we slow down Ashton Jeanty in this game to be able to punch our ticket to the semifinals and play some football in the month of January. Congratulations to James Franklin, a top 10 win. Congratulations to the Penn State Nittany Lions advancing to the college football playoff quarterfinals. Leave all your thoughts, Penn State and SMU, in the comments below. I'm Big Ten Ted. We'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.